Joe Cooper's affidavit and attached exhibits, Michael Neese's affidavit and attached exhibits. You now have Gary Westbrook's affidavit and attached exhibits. You have a joint brief from all of the districts and a brief particularly from the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
For an opportunity to the petitioners to have any rebuttal comments that they wish to make. The record will remain open until March the 14th, the Wednesday. The other thing is, I often get questions about transcripts of this proceeding. If you will contact the court reporter, we handle the transcripts at this stage through the court reporter, because it will be some time before, even after we receive it, before we can get everything fully uploaded onto our website. Also, staff is currently scheduled to present the report on this hearing and on the one next week to the board on June 21st, at the June 21st board meeting. That means that copies of that staff report will be made available to the petitioners and to the districts the week before on June 14th, and they will be available on the website on or about June 15th. I say on or about because it may be a day or two, again, for our IT people to get everything properly uploaded, but probably no later than the 16th. But the board meeting itself will be June 21. With those announcements out of the way, I'll turn it back over now to petitioner NDOT.
For NDOT, the petitioner. Thank you guys for all of your time today. I promise that I'm just going to take a few minutes to close. While I can't address everything that the respondent made in the presentation, I'm going to try to hit some high points. First, I just wanted to clarify a few points that were made by respondent to make sure that we are all clear on the record, and that we're all clear when we leave here today what NDOT's position is about certain things. There was a reference to potentially a personal vendetta by Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District that in some way maybe NDOT's presentation insinuated that or suggested that. That is not what we're saying. Any such insinuation or conclusion was drawn by respondent. We shared those facts with you today about NDOT's process through the permitting process, through the DFC process, as an example to demonstrate how the DFCs are unreasonable, to show how the DFCs have impacted private property rights and how there isn't a prudent development of groundwater resources, and for no other reason. The facts are what the facts are, and I didn't hear anybody on the respondent's side dispute those facts as they were presented. With regard to lack of stakeholder input, NDOT is not saying that it didn't participate in the process. NDOT's not saying that the groundwater districts and GMA 12 didn't hold meetings. We were there. We know they held meetings. What we're saying is what happened in those meetings and then what happened behind closed doors, there was a lack of stakeholder input. Yes, people presented presentations to the districts and to GMA 12 about their position on things. That happened. What then happened is, and this is what we're saying, is that that information, we don't know what happened to it. All of the decisions and the scientific discussion happened behind closed doors in non-public meetings, and then the results were later shared as a result with no explanation of the process, with little or no explanation of the process in public meetings. So there was no understanding of how anything that was presented to the districts was evaluated or used in the process. With regard to average drawdown across the GMA, NDOT is not saying that. NDOT presented today DFCs that are by aquifer and by county. So I'm not sure where that came from. I read it in something that was presented to me today, and I think I heard it. We're not saying that. We understand that the DFCs were presented not as an average drawdown across the GMA. With regard to what this proceeding is about, are the DFCs reasonable? The Water Development Board is charged with determining that, and they have certain factors that they must consider. 7 factors, in fact. Not 1 or 2 of them. Oh, maybe we showed a lot of evidence on this, or maybe they didn't show enough on this. They have to They have to consider all of them, all 7. We have evidence that we submitted in the record, which we couldn't necessarily present to you today, every piece of it, that goes towards each of those 7 factors. What we shared with you today was examples of some of the factors and how those factors deem the DFCs unreasonable. We shared examples with you of how the DFCs are not measurable because there's no monitoring system in place. That point was highlighted by Mr. Thornhill in his presentation. We have presented that the DFCs are arbitrary because they are reverse engineered to be set at a desired demand, and therefore, consequently, there is no way that landowners' property rights can be factored into that, and there can't be reasonable production of the state's groundwater resources as a result. The bottom line is that the Water Development Board is charged with establishing whether the DFCs are reasonable. And how does NDOT's complaint about the process, that the process is flawed, the DFC process is flawed, translate to unreasonable DFCs? The Water Development Board will ultimately decide that issue, which is really what the issue is about today. And in order for you who will leave this presentation today, I ask you to ask yourself, how can a reverse engineered process that sets the DFCs at desired demand be reasonable? How can an inadequately flawed process yield a reasonable result? What we are asking is for the Water Development Board to declare the DFCs unreasonable and direct the GMA-12 to undertake the process again and use the GAM for what it is supposed to be used for, to find out how much water there actually is in the aquifers and set the DFCs accordingly. Thank you for your time today.
This hearing is adjourned. We will be back here next week at the same time and place to hear a petition from Environmental Stewardship, also before this GMA. So thank you again.